first question. Gossage started his career as promotion manager at KLX radio station. Could it be argued that Gossage's ads are, in a sense, all radio? That for him print had to be like a radio show. Chatty, hence the parallel structures approach. Promotional, hence the crazy contests. Interactive, hence the coupons. And creating some hoopla, hence the ad platform technique.
I think that it's probably more valid to say that he started as a promotions guy, and I think that's what he was. He took great delight in telling the story of coming up with the idea of a helium balloon in a box, and he'd send that to people, and then they'd open the box and the balloon would come floating out. And I don't know anyone in promotion, sales promotion, who hasn't had that idea, you know. And he carried on having promotional ideas, and I think that was his default mechanism, you know, kind of when he had a one-off project to do, like say Scientific American, the paper airplane was a promotion, you know, kind of Qantas, you know, kind of one-off. He wasn't in charge of the brand work on that. He wasn't in charge of looking after that account. He was just given that project to do, and his default mechanism, I think, was always to do a promotion, not an ad. You know, kind of, he didn't do ads. It wasn't his training. I think he started as a promo guy, and I don't think that ever left him. I really don't. You know, you look at all of his work. He was when in doubt, you know, do sales promotion technique. So I don't think he was so much a radio guy. Radio commercials are short usually, you know, kind of like 30 seconds, even in those days, you know, and Gossage was not short.
I thought more like a radio show.
A radio show.
Getting listeners to call and...
Yeah, perhaps. I'm not quite sure whether the radio shows were as interactive in those days. I suspect they weren't, Dominic.
Maybe people couldn't call.
I suspect that was a late... The talk joke came later. You know, kind of when the whole feedback thing kind of permeated radio. So I think you've got a very good point, but I would be more inclined to just say sales promotion, and he was the sales promo guy for KLX, and he was, I think, for CBS when he got fired from KLX.
Exactly.
And I think that stayed with him. You know, and he tried to be a writer, and he went to the Golden Gate School and studied writing, you know, and he really did study it. This whole idea that he wasn't interested in advertising is wrong. You know, and he studied under a guy called Herb Reynolds, who taught him the soft sell technique of copywriting. But I think as far as what we would say the idea is concerned, where we go in search of an advertising idea that dramatised or demonstrated the product's benefit, you know, kind of like the proposition. Gossage would do an idea that was a promo idea.
But do I get it right? Did he sometimes only quote unquote like the promotion job and not the brand job?
No, I made that distinction because I think that when Gossage was given a project to do an ad like for Qantas and to announce to the world that Qantas had a super Constellation aircraft, everyone else would have done an ad talking about the benefits of the speed and the comfort or whatever, but Howard did a promotion, win a kangaroo, you know, for Scientific American, a one-off project, trying to persuade you know, kind of business travellers to fly, you know, the airlines to advertise, to attract. But Howard did a sales promotion ad. However, when Howard was given a piece of business by a long-term piece of business, like for example for Petrofina or for Paul Masson Wines or the Irish Distillers, then his modus operandi was very different. He would, and it's been said that he wasn't particularly a brand strategist, and I would argue totally against that. That I would say that his modus operandi, according to the people who had the misfortune to work with him on these occasions, was he would disappear to his eyrie in the top of the firehouse, sustained by everything from chocolate to amphetamine sulfate, he would come down in a terrible mood, and kick the cat and whatever, until he came up with what was the brand idea. He was obsessed. He was very, very interested with brand identity. He didn't like the idea of image. He thought image, almost by self-definition, said that this is a falsehood. But he was very much interested in finding what is the identity of the company for which I'm working. And then he would write pretty much every ad in the first person, taking on that identity and projecting it. So I think there was a lot of strategy involved in the FINA work, kind of like Shell, SO, kind of Mobil were fighting this high-octane wars of bombast and hyperbole about, the ingredient this and the mystery ingredient that. And Gossage didn't want to compete on that level, and he thought, what is the identity of FINA? We're likeable. We'll make them like us. There's nothing to differentiate our gas from anybody else's, but we'll make these people like us. And we'll show we understand that gas is gas, and no one will get in their car and drive specifically to go and fill their car up. It happens, when they see the gauge coming down. So this very empathetic, likeable, kind of like brand,
Exactly.
And that was
like
planned.
A friend.
That was planned, kind of from the onset. Paul Masson wines, the truth there that I think that he homed in on was that Americans still thought that wine was vaguely un-American, perhaps, kind of in the 1950s, and foreign. And the persona he developed for Paul Masson was straight talking, demystifying the wine market, very approachable. Kind of all of this was I think, every ad reinforced or refreshed this brand idea. For Irish distillers, the opposite, foreignness became. He could have fought the Dickells and the Jack Daniels and the bourbon makers on the strength of, well, is our black peaty stream water more, does it enhance the whiskey better than the sweet spring water of Tennessee? And as a lot of advertisers would.
Exactly.
But Howard sold his whiskey on Irishness. And the copy there was florid, discursive to the point of rambling, frankly.
Definitely.
And frankly,
which is very Irish.
Well, it's just like being after a 4-hour session, drinking paddy or Bushmills in a bar in Dingle in the Ring of Kerry. It's like you were sitting in the back of the bar. This conversation that he was the
drunk copy.
He was drunk copy. Yeah. So I think, and that I think, given the opportunity to do what we now call brand strategy, that was his forte as much as anything. Sometimes it didn't work. There are ads that nobody really much talks about for a stereo. A manufacturer's stereo equipment called KLH. And if you look at those ads, they have all of Howard's, kind of wit and idiosyncrasy, but they're 20 ads in search for brand idea. Kind of culminating in Howard with Sally, his wife, as the visual. Like she's lovely to look at, is Sally. And when you're appearing in your ads with your wife, kind of, it's maybe the last resort of somebody who's lost interest or doesn't know what to do. He was capable of writing bum ads,
Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
Yeah. You were talking about his working style. This brings me to another question. As innovative as Gossage was, with regards to the creative process, he was very old school.
Yeah.
For him, the copywriter alone was responsible for coming up with the creative idea.
Yes.
The art director was a mere graphic designer.
Yeah.
Do you know why Gossage didn't believe in the concept of the creative team that had triggered the creative revolution on the other side of the US?
I think we started before and said that Howard started as a sales promo man, and so I don't think that he took his I don't think he ever felt that he was one of the ad guys. You know, he said in a letter he didn't have much interest in any other copywriter apart from himself. You know, and when asked to, I think Printers Inc. asked him to do a praise of who do you think are the great writers, and he said, I don't really take any notice of them. You know, so I think that probably. I don't think he was interested in the fashions that were, you know, kind of that were perhaps, you know, kind of like characterising the industry as it changed in the 60s. I also think that he had what he called a journalistic style of writing. He referred to it as his journalistic style. And what he wanted to do, I think he took his lead from, he said his whole thing was, I want to be more interesting than the editorial and the features that appeared in the newspaper. And so he took his lead from the headline writers. And I think that his intention, I think he felt that he could write a more interesting headline than as appeared in the newspaper. And the art director's job was, as it is in the newspaper, to illustrate the points being made in the article, as opposed to, you know.
That's true.
So I think that was probably why Howard stayed in his room, wrote the ad, you know, kind of, and brought it down and gave it to Margaret Larson, you know, kind of, and George Dipple and the like, and they did very good jobs of making it look in character as well. I mean, you know, kind of Margaret Larson's work on Irish whiskey was beautifully in character with the brand identity that Howard was producing, but they had to follow his lead, I think.
Let's talk about Bernbach a little bit. His advertising philosophy was based on the classic persuasion approach.
Yeah.
You find a compelling argument and present it in a way that makes people stop and read. For Gossage, this approach was manipulative, because it was a one-way form of communications.
Sure.
I'm not sure I agree. Isn't Gossage's indirect parallel structures approach potentially unethical too? Doesn't it sneakily disguise sort of the selling bit?
Right.
Isn't it almost too cunning, too shrewd? Walking off and being indirect and misleading and
yeah. First off, I don't think he thought that the conventional approach was manipulative. I think he thought it was inefficient. I think he admired Bernbach because he managed to make that work. But I think generally he thought it was an inefficient approach to advertising. I think that his objection to that style was more of I think he just felt that, as Jerry Mander said, it was the one talking to the many, exactly, the conventional form. And I think that Gossage railed against that because it was yet another instance of the citizen being reduced to the status of a consumer. You know, like not only were you consuming the goods, you were consuming the ads as well. And I think that then he was very conscious of the impact of euphoric consumerism upon society.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point about Gossage then being, you know, maybe hypocritically, you know, kind of exercised by this because he was being manipulative. I don't think that the kind of this parallel structure thing was manipulative. I do think he would leave the benefit in there. He'd just let you find it, you know, kind of, and he would take you off on maybe a detour, or get you involved in what he wanted to get you involved with that he thought you would be interested in, and the benefit or the product benefit or the product attribute would be in there, you know. And I think he left you to find it and to divine from what you'd read that might be a useful thing in my life. You know?
That's true.
As he said, you know, kind of when baiting the trap with cheese, always leave room for the mouse. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that was a manipulative thing. What was manipulative was his other technique. the one he never talked about in none of his speeches, none of his articles. He never explained this to anybody apart from Barrows Mussey.
The ad platform technique?
The ad platform technique, yeah. And that was quite a revelation for me when I read, Howard's, letter to him. He says, I'm the only person who does this, he said, in the industry. He said, what it is essentially, he said, is that I lay down a story, kind of like in an ad, and then rely upon press conferences and publicity to then explode it out into, into the general public. So the ad was just the first part of what would thereafter be a sometimes quite complex media plan. And that was new. It was new in advertising. Edward Bernays had been doing it.
Exactly.
Edward Bernays had been doing everything, frankly.
He's amazing. He's amazing. The Torches of Freedom walk.
Yeah. The ad tie-in was an Ed Bernays thing. That would be that there would be three things going on at once, which nowadays, we think, but to have three things, working synergistically was an Ed Bernays idea. And Gossage as well, doing several things, why was that manipulative? Because I think that Howard, wasn't averse to telling the big lie.
Well, he made up the flooding of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, pretty much so.
He made it up.
Yes. The lie in the service of the truth, maybe you could call it that, but yeah, I mean that. So, but he was.
It was a good cause.
Yes. But that's probably no great excuse. So I think that was probably manipulative.
Another thing that's maybe a bit manipulative is you said he wanted his ads to be like the most read content in the magazine.
Yeah. And
I think when Birnbach, his advertising always looked like advertising. It did not look like editorial content. It was clear, this is advertising, I want to sell you something.
Yeah.
Whereas Gossage, of course it was advertising, but you could have taken it for editorial content. And isn't that somewhat unethical?
Well, I suppose he was doing it before the regulators jumped on people and said you had to put advertising feature.
Exactly.
As we do now. I suspect so, but maybe his own his own love for what was the typeface that he loved to put everything in?
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of differentiation.
You say it in the book.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Centaur?
Centaur, yeah. My point that he may have sabotaged himself if he was intending to pass it off as advertising by setting every ad in Centaur, so the typeface would look different for the newspaper face. You must remember as well, it was Birnbach who actually set the template for what an ad should look like, which has been slavishly followed ever since. So advertising did look like normal communication until Bill Birnbach moved it into making it look like, hey folks, this is an ad, and moving it into that kind of like, this is how ads look, this is how they sound, to the extent that everybody followed thereafter. Everybody copied that writing style until everybody was writing like a very smart New York Jewish guy.
Then you had a clutter again, basically.
Even in England.
Yeah, it's true.
So everyone was writing like as if they came from, kind of Essex Street, kind of in the Lower East Side, kind of was writing.
Which is funny because then in the end you couldn't set yourself apart from...
No.
Because all advertising was creative advertising.
Yes. Yeah.
Then how do you differentiate yourself?
Well, but and this is why Gossage's message to us now is so surprising. Don't just compete against other ads. That's the easy bit. Compete against the content that surrounds it.
That's a very modern thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
And quite surprising to us. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I thought we just had to compete with other ads.
No. We don't have an ad time and a news time and an entertainment time. We just have time.
But when advertising became advertising, immediately recognisable, kind of as that stuff. Then people started doing that stuff, kind of, and people started competing against the stuff in that ghetto instead of competing against the editorial and the features that surrounded it. Mm. So it was sufficient to do a better ad than the other ads, which is kind of like a dead end, really. Commercial dead end.
It's true.
Might win you a few awards, but
yeah.
It's a commercial dead end.
Gossage never wanted his agency to grow beyond 15 people.
Right.
And kept turning down business. In your experience as an agency founder too, what do you think is the ideal size of an agency? Is small beautiful, or is bigger better?
If you start your agency with the intention of producing work that is markedly better than the norm, and I can't think of any other reason for starting an agency than that numbers don't come into it. You don't start thinking, well, I'm going to start an agency that produces better work than everybody else, and it will have 15 people or it will have 45 people. In fact, the only reason why numbers will become a determinant for you is the size of the talent pool that would enable you to run an agency that was producing work that was better than everybody else. So I don't know. In my own experience, we got to about 20 people fairly quickly, and then we were trucking along quite nicely, doing work of which we were proud, so we were fulfilling the responsibility to ourselves and to the people who we hired, because they came to work for us for that reason. But for me personally, it was a little like playing five-a-side football. I knew there was a bigger game going on in a bigger stadium,
right.
And being a competitive person, I wanted to prove that we could compete and we could beat them. And fortuitously, the chance came along for us to reverse take over a bigger ailing agency, which enabled us to go and play in that big stadium. And we got to about 120 people. That was probably, at our best, we were at 120, and I would say categorically 120 people is the right size to be. Categorically, because you've had the chance to hire most of them. Me and my partner probably interviewed all of the people. You know generally who they are. You know generally what kind of contribution they're making to the organisation, and most importantly, also they feel that they can make a difference. So 120, maybe 121 if that other person is kind of friendly and good fun and nice to have around. 121.
Maybe 15 was the right size for San Francisco, which was not Madison Avenue.
No, I mean I think Howard was just had to be in control, and he couldn't tolerate another writer in the building. He couldn't tolerate. I mean, Jerry Mander was was a publicist, and he was interestingly enough, he was a publicist, a PR man.
Exactly.
And that's why Howard hired him. He didn't hire him because he was a writer. Howard wanted to do this platform technique, and he admired Jerry's talents for that. Jerry's also a great writer, but it was his skills in publicity. So Howard couldn't tolerate another writer in the building. And he just needed to be in control, so 15 was probably the extent, he was like, he had to do everything. He wrote the strategy, as I say, he wrote the marketing communications strategy as well, so he did the media strategy.
Exactly.
And then he wrote the ads. So it's a great toll to him as well. I think it became, kind of too onerous for him after 10 years, as you can imagine.
You said he didn't want any writer in the agency apart from himself, and he didn't want any account people. That's a modern thought. I think Mother is most famously
yes
got rid of account people. Do you think this is a good idea?
Not really. I think that Mother have made it work, so who am I really to critique that decision? But my opinion is that good creative people, really good creative people, kind of enjoy coming up with ideas, and they enjoy crafting an idea, and they enjoy focusing upon that role, I think, and to divert them into a client-facing role, whilst many of them are quite capable of doing it.
Oh, Gossage was.
Yeah, absolutely. yeah.
And he was pretty creative.
Yes.
He didn't mind.
Your book tells me Bernbach was a great salesman.
Obviously, he was a better salesman than he was a copywriter.
Well, possibly.
Bob Levinson told me.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah.
So creative people can, there's nothing. We haven't got any problem facing clients, but I always figured that it was a waste of their talents. I used to get them out and see the client occasionally. It was good. Similarly, I think that good client service people who can take a client's marketing brief. I'm not selling enough widgets at the moment, and they expect that ad. And I'm sorry, but 70% of all advertising agencies make their money out of doing an ad that says buy more widgets. Whereas a good agency and a good account person will say, actually, we're not trying to solve your marketing problem, mate. We're trying to solve the problem of the prospect with your product, and we're going to do an ad which says, if you've got this problem, this widget will solve it for you. Now, that is very rare nowadays, but it takes a good account person to disavow the client of the belief that buy more widgets isn't a good ad. Do you understand what I mean? Exactly. And most agencies make their money by rocking up to the client going, we've done your buy more widgets ad. Do you like it? And he says, fucking great. Can you make the widgets bigger? Yes, we can. We can certainly make them bigger. So client service people who can explain to a client that this is how advertising works. And then write it, get it down as a brief, and then go and sell it, and then steer it through, because once you've sold it, it's job's only just half started. Many great pieces of work get bought, but they get lost in the several weeks to fumbling and kickball and scramble that goes on thereafter. So it's different skills, Dominic, and they complement each other. But I think you need to have those folk doing different things.
Maybe now even more than then, maybe.
Probably. I don't know why. My brief experience of how agencies work now is that I'm not sure that the client service people are trained in the way that they were. But I don't want this to turn into a jeremiad about the way the industry isn't what it used to be. So
let's not be nostalgic, huh?
No,
we're not nostalgic, of course not.
No. But I don't think there's anything to be gained by me sitting here sucking my teeth, saying Frank Lowe wouldn't have done that, because most of the people who are watching this wouldn't know who Frank Lowe is. But,
As you point out, Gossage focused on one media, print,
yes.
And then again on one print title, The New Yorker.
Yes.
In fact, it was as specialized and narrowed down as you could possibly get. Do you think this is a good idea? Would you recommend this to an agency? Do one thing, but do it really, really well?
Given the mediocrity that obtains in the industry, as it does in every industry.
Full service.
Generally, most restaurants will give you a 6 out of 10 if you're lucky. Most taxi drivers will give you a 6 out of 10 if you're lucky. Most advertising agencies will give you a 6 out of 10 if you're lucky. So mediocrity is the normative. So doing anything particularly well has got to be a good idea. But so producing games that that communicate your brand, reinforce your brand ideas. Probably, if you're an agency that did that would be good, or an agency that specialises in mobile phone, you know, kind of mobile advertising, or an agency that does telly, just TV spots, and did that particularly well would prosper. But I think that what the point is that Howard Gossage didn't just do press advertising. He wrote an ad and then it dovetailed with other media, you know, kind of like it was amplified in other areas. And so Howard Gossage, yeah, he wrote the ad, but I think, as I've said before, he would then, you know, kind of publish the book which featured the responses to the ad, or there would be a press release talking about whatever. And there would be a toy produced to be sold in New York's biggest toy shop, you know, kind of. So the agency nowadays does media games and specialises in that, but also has the ability to amplify that message and to tie it in, as Ed Bernays would say, with different strategies, well, different tactics, sorry, in order to achieve your media strategy. That would be a good idea. So specialism, but the ability to amplify it in relevant and abruptive ways. That makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, I hope my next question makes sense.
Okay.
I was a philosophy major, Steve, so you will forgive me this question. But has it occurred to you, yes, that Gossage could be considered the first and maybe the only postmodern ad man? I see a link between his non-linear way of writing and the postmodern literature and philosophy. The universal, eternal, linear, authoritarian, monophonic, grand narrative of the ad campaign, or the brand, or the organization, is replaced by the local, temporary, parallel, liberal, polyphonic, micro-narrative of you do an ad and then you wait what happens before you do another ad.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's not so sure anymore about the big picture. He starts small,
yes,
and then waits what happens, and then does another thing, and then waits again, you know?
Yes. I am not as au fait with the great French philosophical midfield of
postmodernism,
Foucault,
yeah.
But I don't know. I think I said that I was struggling with that question when we did discuss it before, and you said that you played it back to me, and I said that Gossage needs to be understood in terms of the
like pinch.
Yeah, exactly, and a whole generation of. I don't see it so much as an ism. I see it just as almost a collective response to the traumas of the Second World War experience.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And so I think that the people like Dan DeLillo and Barth and Pynchon is a classic postmodern writer, but yeah. Dan DeLillo, Barth, and I think they came later, and I'm more interested in the cataclysmic effect that World War II had upon
exactly
people like Pynchon, who was 2 years, I think, in the U.S. Navy, and they're not all postmodernists, but it affected them terribly. You know, Norman Mailer, who
I'm sure it did, definitely.
Who's kind of his white Negro, the kind of like it wasn't postmodernist, it was nihilistic.
Definitely, yeah.
You know, kind of who wrote Catch-22?
Joseph Heller.
Yeah, 2 years. Flew 60 bombing missions over Berlin. You know, kind of John Cheever. You know, kind of terribly, you know, kind of mixed up, you know, kind of like the short form chronicler of mid-20th century angst, you know, kind of, yeah, I think he was in those services, but he was airlifted out because of his writing abilities. but didn't escape the trauma because nearly everybody in his platoon was wiped out on Omaha Beach. So there was no escape from this. And Gossage was similarly, I think, you know, kind of just there was a in the First World War, the Americans were aware of the impact of taking this very insular people, you know, kind of like small town American, transporting it. There was a song called "How Are You Going to Keep Them Down on the Farm After They've Seen Paris?" Well, after the Second World War, it was how are you going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen Berlin from 35,000 feet, you know, in Joseph Heller's case, or after they've flown over enemy-occupied Hong Kong harbour at 20 feet, which was Gossage's
Gossage
case.
did, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we both expressed a love of the film The Master, which features Joaquin Phoenix's character, Freddie Mac, I think, or whatever it is. I don't think he's a postmodernist. You know, I think he's just fucked up by.
It's just angst-ridden.
And as a result of what happened to him in the Navy, you know, kind of. So I think that that's what less a blanket. Less a blanket philosophic, because that in a way kind of like, I don't know, it dehumanises what it was. It must have been a terribly, you know, kind of, you've got to be sensitive to the human cost of all of that, and I think giving it a term postmodernism kind of almost sanitises and institutionalises it, academically institutionalises it, you know. Does that
makes perfect sense. But then again, maybe because of his experience of the war, he wanted advertising to be he wanted to humanize it.
Yes. Well, I think
he didn't want it to be like cold and dehumanized. He wanted to rehumanize it, maybe.
Yeah.
That's why he had this colloquial and feedback and
the need to connect,
approach.
The need to connect.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, I ascribed some of that to his reading of Wiener.
Yeah.
You know, and Wiener saw this as a means of ameliorating the problems of society, as did Marshall McLuhan.
Yes.
You know, they saw this as a way of making. I mean, McLuhan saw it as a quasi-religious, not even quasi. He saw it as it had religious objectives. It was kind of the expression of his Roman Catholic belief. But Wiener saw it as a means of making a terribly, you know, kind of like flawed and dangerous world a better place. You know, kind of, and so if Gossage picked that up and thought, well, I can use this if mass communication can, in its way, be imbued with this sense of reciprocity.
Absolutely.
Then maybe, in a way, we can do something better. You know, his whole thing wasn't it? That
it was a sort of humanism, wasn't it?
I owe more to my first loyalty is to the person who's reading this, not to the person who's paying for it to appear in the newspaper. You know. So yes, you're right.
Advertising is humanism in a certain
Yes.
sense.
Yes, which is the opposite of postmodernism, because postmodernism actually denies humanism, the humanist approach that we are getting better and society can be improved. You know, kind of postmodernism, I think it takes a much more bleak view of that, doesn't it? And Gossage wasn't bleak about things. It has been said that my book is the kind of biography that Frank Capra, the great American populist filmmaker, would have written had he written a biography. You know, kind of, it reads like a Capra film. You know, kind of, you know, Mr. Gossage goes to town.
Right.
I don't know whether you know your Capra, but you know, kind of it's very homely, you know, homespun. You know, kind of the imbued with optimism. Gossage was, I think. And he, you know, kind of things can be done. He was an old-fashioned hero.
Changing the world's the only fit way.
It's a bit of a clue, isn't it?
Which brings me to another question. That's this chapter in my book that gets criticized quite a lot. It's the last chapter about Alex Bogosky being the new Bill Bernbach. I wrote it because I really think he started a new creative revolution, from offline to online, from paid media to buzz, from creating an ad campaign to launching popular movements. But I would suggest that we put this chapter into your book under the headline "The New Howard Luck Gossage."
Yes.
Isn't it almost eerie how Alex Bogusky seems to not only have adopted Gossage's advertising philosophy, but his life philosophy too? Alex seems to think that changing the world is the only fit work for a grown man, and that to do so, eventually you have to quit advertising.
Right.
As did Gossage.
Yes, yes.
It's like a blueprint for...
It is, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, Bogusky did, as you probably know, he told me that they used to sit around and think, what would Howard do?
Exactly.
And he very generously said that he didn't have the talent of Gossage. He and his crowd didn't have the talent that Gossage had. But they had one big advantage, and that was the coming of Web 2.0, which meant that whereas Howard had to do his ad platform technique, had to rely upon the conventional media of newspapers, magazines and perhaps radio, Crispin Porter and those who followed their lead could have their messages amplified by social media.
Exactly.
To the extent that nowadays that seems to be almost an end in itself from my kind of like observation of the way the industry is going. That selling something has now become almost secondary to getting 100,000 people or 1 million people to say they like your message on Facebook.
Facebook is not a selling tool.
No.
It just isn't.
But I think that it's become everyone, I mean, Crispin Porter got there first, and I suspect sold shed loads of things as a result, but they also won a lot of Cannes Lions, and I think that this is the new, just as we were saying about everybody suddenly started doing an ad that looked like Bill Bernbach's ad. Everybody does a campaign that looks like a Crispin Porter campaign, and has been doing for the past 15 years. As far as him getting out is concerned, like Howard did,
yeah.
I think getting out it probably occurs to. It's probably not a. It's probably not a bad idea, kind of like any sentient human being after a while looks around themselves. I mean, and wonders, how long can this last? And I'm always minded of a quote by an English politician called Enoch Powell, who said that all political lives, unless diverted down midstream at a happy juncture, end in failure. And I've always thought that you can remove
Definitely.
Political
yeah.
and put all advertising lives, unless diverted midstream at a happy juncture, end in failure. I think it's appropriate to Bogusky. I don't know anything about the chap really, but I was au fait with the Fearless Cottage stuff when I was in touch with him,
Exactly.
and he looks to me for all the world like he's going to make a run for the presidency in 2020.
Let's hope.
Watch this space. Yeah.
This consultancy that Gossage set up, Generalists Inc. You say, but very briefly, that this made him a precursor of linking behavioral economics to marketing. Could you expand on that a little?
I think it was because, and it goes back to the thing that Howard wasn't an ad man. He felt himself, he was an extra environmentalist himself. He always figured that you could only see the answer to a problem if you weren't immersed in it. He famously said that he didn't know who it was who discovered water, but it certainly wasn't a fish. You're surrounded by something all the time.
Okay.
And I think that he started Generalists Inc. because he never felt like he was an ad man, and he probably felt slightly bogus recommending an advertising solution to a client's problem. And I think he enjoyed wrestling with problems and being a student of human nature, as I think that he was, and being interested in the impact that his advertising had upon people. And I think that's a rare thing amongst advertising people. Most creatives don't care, They do just want to talk at you, and they don't care. But I think Howard was interested in the impact that that his advertising was having on people. And therefore he wanted to know how did they behave, around the advertising, around the problem, around the issue that he was dealing with. And I think that was what he was in. I think that's where generalists came from. Of course, his partner Gerald Fagan was a psychologist.
Exactly.
Exactly. So I think they were interested in people, rather than just marketing communications, which again is a great thing. Kind of the ad man who isn't interested in people usually burns out and leaves the industry after 10 years.
It's true.
Great creative teams who come in at 22, kind of who spend 10 years being patted on the back and being given plaudits, but only take a brief on a Monday and churn out something a fortnight later with no real interest in who's looking at it, how it's affecting them. Kind of will usually leave the industry, because it's dull. And so I think Howard was a curious man in both senses of the word. And I think he was curious about human nature, and I think he figured there were more ways of getting people to do something than writing an ad and asking them to do it.
Mm-hmm. I know Rory Sutherland and some other people really try to educate advertising people, marketing people about behavior economics, but still it does not really take off, which I don't understand at all. Shouldn't it? Why isn't it more embraced by our industry? I mean, it's about behavior, it's about changing behavior, it's about how people think and make decisions. Why don't we see the potential of behavioral economics for our industry?
Because we're over here doing better ads than we're just doing ads, or we're doing apps, or we're doing virals, or we're doing stuff that's called marketing communication. We don't want to think of it in terms of how the person receives it and how they receive it as just part of a whole bafflingly confusing array of stimuli. They see it as we're just doing ads, man.
And are we doing them for other ad people?
We're doing it for other ad people, yeah. There's been a recent, a good old-fashioned furore, was caused earlier this year by a Marmite campaign. Marmite is a jar of kind of beef extract in the UK, it's been a great campaign, and you either love it or you hate it. And what I'm sure has been found is that the sales are down you can't stimulate sales because people got a jar of Marmite, but it's stuck behind other stuff in the cupboard, and people have got it and they're not using it, but they've got it so they're not buying new stuff. So what they've done, they produced a campaign picturing the Marmite behind, the salt and the cumin and the whatever.
Choice architecture.
Being neglected in the cupboard. It's being neglected in the cupboard. Yeah. And so this whole, was it regarded as distasteful because it was like you're neglecting, it's like social services were coming in and rescuing the Marmite from the back of the cupboard, and taking it to a home.
But that's a behavioural insight,
It is, but it would have been a lot easier. I think it would have been a lot smarter, for example, to just get the Marmite and put refrigerate on it, on the label.
Right.
So that every time I open the fridge, I see the Marmite.
Yes.
So you solve the problem. If it's in the shelf somewhere behind the treacle and the syrup and the salt and the pepper and the coffee, then solve that problem. Don't tell people you want to solve it. Solve it with
That's
an
the
idea.
most efficient idea.
Put refrigerate.
Exactly.
Put refrigerate on the
Make it visible.
Yeah. So it's there. So you use it more often. But we won't do that, Dominic, because
we don't get awards for them.
We don't get awards for them, and we're not, and we've got this, and there's been a furore about it. And advertising is great again. We can still get into the newspapers and be naughty.
Yeah, I see your point. Problem is our definition of creativity is too small. It's as creative as having the idea for a great campaign, telling a client, hey, put refrigerator on your product so people will see it and use it more often. That's creative too.
Yes.
But you don't get awarded for it. You know,
No.
that's a problem.
No.
Maybe this whole awards scene and industry is limiting, in fact, creativity instead of fostering it.
Well, I suppose, it goes back to the people we celebrate. We celebrate Birnbach because of his award-winning advertising, and a friend of mine is writing a book about CDP, and that is a celebration of some splendid award-winning work.
Of course.
So we lionize them, but we emulate them to the extent that becomes the
only way to go.
I'm afraid so, yeah. And that's the way it has gone, I think. I'm sure someone will be coming up with an award scheme for, maybe Rory and the advocates of it should. I think that the language they use also is the reason why. The language they use, they have turned it into a pseudo-science. It can be explained simpler. With all due respect to the practitioners, I think that they're actually showing us how clever they are, and are distancing themselves and saying, we're not like you people, we're not lost in this, kind of Marcom's maelstrom. We're stepped above it, and I think the language they use is self-evidently damaging to their cause.
Yeah, maybe. Rory's doing a lot to popularize it, but it could be more popular.
I think that time needs to be taken out to actually stop talking about game theory and stop talking about heuristic things and start. It should be made understandable to the average client, and the average practitioner, and it isn't. And do that, and have an award scheme backed by D&AD, and I think that you will see you will change people's behaviour.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.